that fear, which I put down as adrenaline, fear, works for you. It doesn't work against you, and one never wants to be afraid of fear in the air.
On July the 17th, Lieutenant Commander Graham King survived a mid-air collision and this crash landing at the Naval Air Station Nowra.
It was the first accident that I've had in 18 years of flying. However, a couple of other members have had some accidents. Barry Evans, for one, 2 years ago.
What happened there? Well, I was involved in pitching off HMAS Melbourne. For reasons better known to the engineers, the aircraft didn't reach flying speed by the end of the catapult. And as a result, the aircraft ditched in the water directly ahead of the ship.
The carrier was coming behind you?
Yes.
What happened? Did the aircraft sink?
The aircraft sank straight down. The ship hit the aircraft before it was deep enough to clear the ship. And I managed to get out of the aircraft around about 60 to 70 feet below the ship, or below the surface of the water.
The ship was passing over the top of you. You could see the ship?
I wasn't worried about looking for the ship at that time, so you know, I was just worried about getting out of the aircraft, and once I got clear of the aircraft, the ship was clear of me. Yes.
And what you surfaced behind the ship?
Well, from what I believe, yes, there are a couple of differing reports there. Some people believe I came up beside the ship, but from what I can remember, I came up the stern of the ship.
805 has always been the teeth of the fleet. They've had the fighters, and they've provided the Navy flying team, the checkmates. If there is a glamorous image in the Fleet Air Arm, the checkmates have got it. Checkered scarves, the red and white checks on their aircraft, and of course the fastest aircraft the Navy has had. After the propeller-driven Sea Fury, the Australian Navy's first jet fighter, the Sea Venom. In the mid-60s, it looked like the end of the line for Navy jets. But just in time, the Navy's Buy British policy changed, and 20 A4 Skyhawk aircraft were bought from the United States. The Skyhawk can carry its own weight in weaponry, and it's transonic. That means, depending which way it's pointing, it can break the sound barrier. It flies like a brick. The paper bag I was given before going up wasn't a joke, it was a necessity. Landing at Nowra is something like landing on a carrier. It has a carrier deck marked out on the runway, a mirror for pilots to line up on, and an arrestor wire. But there's nothing quite like a night landing on the carrier Melbourne.
If it's a real black night, then you're really going to have problems because you've got no depth perception of the ship at all, and all you can see is the mirror and its lights and the line-up lights on the deck. So you can't actually ever see the deck. And even though you may have shot 100 day approaches, the night approach, where you can't actually see the deck, and even though that's not the policy that we follow, gives you an insecure feeling. As you're getting closer and closer to the water, you can't see the deck, but you know you're on the ball. You start to get, the adrenaline starts to pump through your system. And in fact, you can get to a stage where it's a bit like having just missing a car accident. You get that automatic feeling that something's just going to happen. And this can, in fact, lead you into over-controlling, which is one of the most dangerous things you can do.
In 8 years, the Navy has lost 4 Skyhawks and 2 pilots have been killed. The man who commands the Naval Air Station, Commodore Andrew Robertson, defends the Skyhawk and the men who fly it.
Well, in the days of the old Sea Fury, there were quite a few. During the Korean War, for instance, in the work-up phases there, in very heavy seas, we'd get a number of barrier crashes in a day. I do recall once when I was in a follow-up destroyer all those years ago, when our job was to pick up the people who may have landed in the sea, and we did on that occasion have about 10 or 11 crashes of one sort and another in 2 or 3 days.
Some of your new pilots in 805 Squadron are quite young. Are they too young?
No, of course not. I think during the last war, for instance, it used to be said that the younger men of perhaps 17, 18, 19, with much sharper reactions, would make extremely good fighter pilots. I don't think our men are too young at all. They have, of course, a very intensive training before they're ever let near an aircraft carrier.
Well, how much training would a 19-year-old Skyhawk pilot have before he gets into a frontline squadron?
Well, it would vary slightly depending on aircraft availability and training, but on the whole it would be about 2 years. You see, he starts off at Point Cook, and there he would do several months on wind gills with the Air Force, and then he does about 9 months over at Pierce in Western Australia on Mackie jet fighters. Then he comes to us to a second-line squadron where he learns all about the carrier aircraft themselves and does operational flying for perhaps a year, certainly a minimum of 6 months on Mackies and then on Skyhawks. And then eventually, after that, about 2 years, he joins the carrier air group. And of course, there's an intensive workup phase in these sort of operations before he ever lands on the carrier.
Andy, you're one of the new pilots. How do you feel about doing carrier landings?
Well, we've given it a bit of thought, and we practice for it on the airfield here, but the prospect pleases me that I'll be able to do it. It doesn't terrify me particularly, but I haven't seen it. It probably will once I get out there. But at the moment, it's just something to look forward to.
The Australian Navy is now flying its 3rd generation of aircraft. And with each new generation, it has more than halved the damage rate of the preceding types. The prop-driven Sea Furies and Fireflies averaged 50 accidents for every 10,000 flying hours. But when the Melbourne joined the fleet, with its Gannets and Sea Venoms, the accidents dropped to 18 per 10,000 hours. And remarkably, the much heavier and faster Skyhawks and Trackers have cut the accident rate back to just 7 per 10,000 hours. But the danger and exhilaration, the need for split-second decisions, is greater than ever.
It has been stated that the heartbeat of a pilot on finals for a carrier approach is higher than a guy in actual combat. Now, I find that fairly hard to believe, but really, you know, that was a statement made by aviation medicine doctors. And perhaps in the night environment, definitely I believe that is the case.